This Day in Sports History. This episode is brought to you by the Sterling Soap Company. How often do you think about your soap? Well, if you answered, not much, maybe you should. You see, a lot of what passes for soap in stores is technically not soap, according to the FDA's definition. It's full of lab-created chemicals and detergents because it's cheaper to make. Now, what if you could buy natural soap made from natural ingredients like tallow, palm oil, coconut oil, and scented with essential oils, and for just a little bit more than you'd pay for grocery store soap? Sterling Soap is 100% natural, and with a wide variety of bath soaps, shave soaps, beard balm, lotions, and cologne, there's a product and a scent for just about everybody. Check them out for yourself at sterlingsoap.com. That's STIRLING soap.com. And welcome back to This Day in Sports History, a member of the Sports History Network. You can find more information and more podcasts at sportshistorynetwork.com. It's January 20th, and on this day in 1970, if you had $5 in your pocket and a couple of hours to spend at a movie theater, then you could have seen one of the greatest fights that never happened. I came across this old movie poster in an antique shop recently, and it took me a long time to A, figure out what I was looking at, B, figure out if what I was looking at was legit or fake, and C, to try to figure out and understand how in the world they would be able to pull something like this off in 1970. The movie poster was advertising a fight between Rocky Marciano and Muhammad Ali. It was billed as the Super Fight and the Mystery Bout of the Century. These are two fighters from slightly different eras. Marciano retired in 1956 at the age of 32, and Ali's first professional fight was not until 1960. Now, as sports fans, we often ask the unanswerable questions, such as, who would win if the 27 Yankees played the 75 Reds? Or would the 72 Dolphins be able to handle the 07 Patriots? So this was a project that was created by a radio producer named Murray Warrener. He actually thought a little bigger than just two fighters, though. His initial project was to take 16 fighters from the 19th and 20th centuries and then put them in a virtual bracket and have them fight virtually to determine the best boxer of all eras. Warrener started this in 1967, and he used variables from the fighters, and he plugged this data into a giant computer that had all of 20K of memory. And what they got on the other end, Warrener and fellow radio man Guy LeBeau turned into radio broadcasts with blow-by-blow commentary. Now, again, it was complete fantasy, but based on some data. Now, at the end of their 16-boxer tournament, Rocky Marciano was determined to be the champion and even received a championship belt. Now, Ali was not happy. He had been a part of the original 16-boxer bracket. In this virtual world, he was knocked out by Jim Jeffries in the second round of their virtual fight. It should be noted that Ali was in the midst of his suspension from boxing for refusing to be drafted into the Army, and as such was not the most popular person in the U.S. at this point. So Ali sued Warrener for defamation of character. He said he would never lose to the clumsiest, slowest-footed heavyweight of all time. Warrener had a better idea. He gave Ali $10,000 if he agreed to be in a film version in a virtual fight versus Marciano. Ali agreed. Marciano was excited about this project. He trained hard, losing 50 pounds in the process, and he also bought a new toupee for the film project.
Well, I'm glad that we've got a computer being the man that makes the decision. I've never predicted a fight in my life. I've never knocked anybody before a fight, and I'm certainly not going to start now. I'm happy that this fight is taking place on the computer because there'll be no hometown decisions and there'll be no prejudice in this fight. It'll be done by a machine with all the human elements taken out of it, and I'm very pleased about that.
They actually got both fighters in an actual ring, and they exchanged some soft punches from different angles to simulate the action. It's estimated they sparred for 75 rounds to get the footage needed to put the film together. Well, on this day in 1970, the super fight debuted in about 1,500 theaters in the U.S., Canada, and Europe.
Rocky Marciano, Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay, and this, the classic championship fight. Uniquely, the two only undefeated heavyweight champions of the world.
Tickets were $5, and it was one night only. Now, it is a bit odd when you learn that there were two versions of this film released when this was supposed to be a computer-simulated fight based on data and metrics. The audiences in the US and Canada were shown a version with Marciano knocking out Ali in the 13th round.
And he keeps it up, not taking much as he drives him here into the ropes. That is accurate bashing by The Rock.
Ali was not super excited about that result, saying the computer must have been built in Alabama. Audiences in Europe saw Ali win by TKO. The film grossed about $5 million worldwide, but unfortunately, Marciano did not get a chance to see the finished project. He was killed in a plane crash August 31, 1969, 3 weeks after filming on the project wrapped up. Whether the super fight actually settled any arguments is debatable in itself, but it is interesting that this thing actually happened on this day in 1970. On this day in 1968, it was the game of the century in college basketball. Now, this game not only lived up to its billing, garnering a substantial amount of attention nationwide, but it was a landscape-altering game in the history of college basketball. So this is top-ranked UCLA taking on number 2 Houston in the Houston Astrodome, which at that time was known as the 8th wonder of the world. The game was moved to the Astrodome to accommodate a large crowd. The Cougars typically played their games on campus in a 5,500-seat arena. On this night, there would be more than 52,000 in the seats and millions more watching on television in more than 100 different markets. This was the first nationally televised college basketball game in an era when televising games was in its infancy. Prior to this, games had been broadcast regionally in specific cities, but this is the first time nationwide that you could watch this game live. Now, the Astrodome was cavernous for a playing surface that measures 94 feet by 50 feet. The court, which was brought in from Los Angeles specifically for this game, was set up where second base typically was located. Fans were a couple of hundred feet away from the floor, and it was an odd atmosphere. There were a lot of people who didn't think that it would work. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar said it was like playing in the middle of a prairie. And the South was not exactly a basketball-happy place at this point. Football was really the only sport that people in the southern states tended to care enough about to purchase tickets for. But this game changed all of that. Coming into this game, UCLA had not lost in more than 2 years, riding a 47-game winning streak, and they were led by the 7'2" Lew Alcindor, as he was known then. Houston was a perfect 14-0 on the season, and they had an equally powerful force in the middle in 6'9" Elvin "the Big E" Hayes. And once the ball went in the air, the game was a great one. Dick Enberg was calling the action for NBC that night.
It's the Bruins in blue of the ball. Mike Warren and Lucius Allen the backcourt. Allen, number 42, off to Warren on the side of Shackelford. Into Alcindor. He goes up. He scores. All-American Alcindor's first bucket of the game. UCLA leads it 10-7. Houston setting up the offense. Don Chaney, the quarterback. Number 24 in white, 6'5" guard. On the side, it is Hayes underneath. He scores over Edgar Lacey. It's 10-9. Hayes has 5 points. The Bruins in front by 1.
Houston led by 3 at the break, and it was tight most of the way through the final 20 minutes. With 28 seconds left, it was tied at 69 when Hayes sank a pair of free throws, and UCLA could not find the bucket on the opposite end. The Cougars won 71-69, snapping UCLA's winning streak. Hayes had his best night as a collegian, with 39 points and 15 rebounds. Here's Elvin 20 years later talking about that game and what it meant.
You go out and you play in a game like that, it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing because anybody who saw that game, they can tell you what they was doing, where they was, anything they was doing at the moment. It was a historical event. It was just really, from my personal standpoint, was a great opportunity and a great honor to be a part of it.
Kareem finished with 15 points and 12 rebounds. But here's one thing about that game, and this is not to provide an excuse, but rather to shed some light. He'd suffered a scratched cornea 8 days earlier in a game against Cal, and he'd spent 4 days in the hospital, and he'd missed the 2 games leading up to this one. So, with the weird optics of playing in a huge dome and fans hundreds of feet away, his eyesight wasn't 100%, and that may have played into it. From a historical perspective, this game was much more than a novelty. It was a sea change. Prior to this, the only time that you could watch college basketball on television, as we said, was regionally, and even then it was limited, and the game might not be broadcast live. This game showed that putting college basketball on television in the Deep South even proved that people all over the country would tune in. NBC stepped up the following year and broadcast the national championship game live, becoming the first of the 3 major networks to do that. Of course, Hayes was asked about this game many times over the years that followed, and one of his quotes about how big this game was, he said, "I think that game kicked the door down, opened the windows, and knocked the roof off the house. What we have today in March Madness is what I think the game in 1968 opened." Also on this day, in 1996, Fox Sports debuted the FoxTrax hockey puck in an effort to help television viewers follow the action better. The glowing hockey puck had mixed reviews. For one, the puck was heavier than normal pucks due to the electronics inside. It also was battery-powered and had to be changed out a few times throughout the game. Hockey purists weren't big fans, and the innovation died when Fox lost the NHL TV rights after the '99 season. And in 1980, the greatest and most beloved Super Bowl commercial, at least by me, of all time, played to an audience of 100 million people. You know the one.
Big cheer.
Thanks, Mean Joe.
The Mean Joe Greene Hey Kid Catch Coca-Cola commercial debuted in the fall of '79, but it wasn't until this day that it became a classic due to the large television audience watching Super Bowl XIV. The commercial took 2 days to shoot, mostly because, well, as Mean Joe said later, I drank 18 Cokes and couldn't stop belching after every one of them and couldn't deliver the line. Another interesting fact, they actually expanded this idea into a made-for-TV movie called The Steeler and the Pittsburgh Kid that aired in 1981. The kid wasn't the kid from the commercial. Instead, it was Henry Thomas, who played a 10-year-old that was adopted by the Steelers, with Mean Joe as the kid's father figure. Thomas would go on to be pretty well known himself a few months later when he got cast in the Spielberg movie E.T. And time now for today's That's Got Nothing to Do with Sports fun fact. Did you know that the ZIP in zip code stands for Zone Improvement Plan?
Say what?
The U.S. Postal Service implemented zip codes to identify specific locations to deliver mail. The codes were introduced in 1963 and allowed for maximizing efficiency and, eventually, automated sorting and distribution. This has been an original Thrive Suite production.